The episode begins at an airport. Seong Gi-hun, visibly disturbed, moves quickly while taking a call from a robotic voice warning him, "You cannot escape." Gi-hun responds furiously that he won't hide and that he'll find that person no matter what. He then takes a taxi to Seoul. Shortly after, he's seen in a public bathroom, meticulously checking his body until finding a small chip implanted behind his ear. He manages to extract it and, with evident concern, disposes of it. We learn that Gi-hun owns a place called Hotel Rosa. There he meets with a loan shark to whom he delivers suitcases full of money. He orders him to find the recruiter, a suited man with a briefcase and game chips, who operates in train stations, approaching indebted people, and then disappearing without a trace. The loan shark, motivated by the immense reward Gi-hun offers, deploys his men across various stations and public places to find this mysterious figure. Meanwhile, police officer Hwang Jun-ho, who woke up from a coma after the events of the first season, suffers constant nightmares about the front man. In these visions, he remembers the moment when the masked figure removed his mask, revealing he was his own brother, Hwang In-ho, and that it was he who shot him before he fell into the sea. 2 years later, Jun-ho has resumed his position in the police force, but few believe him. His account of macabre games lacks photos or solid evidence. His superior refuses to help him without evidence, but Jun-ho remains determined to unmask those who run these lethal tournaments. Hwang Jun-ho, still recovering after being shot by his own brother, has spent months trying to locate the island where the games are organized. At the port, Captain Park, an experienced sailor, receives him in a small fishing boat to track new points marked on the map. The sea becomes increasingly stormy, but Jun-ho insists there are still unexplored areas where crucial evidence might be hidden. Captain Park, between misgivings and warnings of danger, admits they've gone more than a year without finding any trace, though he respects Jun-ho's determination. After fruitless hours and an increasingly violent storm, they must return without results, and the captain suggests that perhaps the currents diverted them from their objective. Despite the frustration, Jun-ho doesn't give up. He promises to return as soon as weather permits. One day, the loan shark's men finally locate the recruiter at a station, performing the same slapping game for money that he used with Gi-hun in the past. Immediately, the loan shark calls Gi-hun, who drives at full speed to get there. After exceeding the speed limit, Gi-hun is stopped by a patrol. Among the officers is, by chance, Jun-ho. When requesting his papers, Jun-ho notices Gi-hun's tension, as well as the large number of phones and tablets he carries. His suspicions are aroused, and he decides to investigate on his own, even without knowing what role this man plays in the conspiracy he's pursuing. After evading the police, Gi-hun heads to the station, but the loan shark, impatient, decides to act on his own. He and one of his thugs follow the recruiter to an alley intending to catch him. However, they underestimate his dangerousness. The recruiter knocks them out and leaves them unconscious. When they wake up, they are bound and blindfolded, while classical music plays in the background. The recruiter, with a sadistic attitude, proposes a macabre game of Russian roulette, combined with rock, paper, scissors. In each round, the loser must face a shot with the gun, whose chamber has been loaded randomly. After several empty chamber clicks, the fatal turn comes to the loan shark, who receives the bullet and dies instantly. Meanwhile, Jun-ho continues investigating Gi-hun's identity. He discovers that this man has put a fortune at stake to find the recruiter, and that many of the loan shark's debtors have mysteriously disappeared. Searching through the now-deceased loan shark's office, Jun-ho finds details about Hotel Rosa, which confirms to him that Gi-hun is orchestrating a massive search against the enigmatic recruiter. Gi-hun, alerted about the recruiter's latest movements, returns to his own motel Hotel Rosa. Upon entering, he senses something strange. The reception is deserted, but the lights remain on. He enters cautiously and comes face to face with the recruiter, who points a gun at him. The recruiter mentions that Gi-hun should have boarded that plane, as seen at the end of the first season, instead of seeking revenge. Gi-hun demands to know the mastermind behind the games, accusing him of recruiting helpless people with false promises. The recruiter simply challenges him to a Russian roulette duel. The gun holds a single bullet in one of its 6 chambers. Each must shoot themselves in turns. After several shots that don't hit the loaded chamber, the definitive round arrives. Gi-hun manages to avoid it one last time and hands the gun to the recruiter, mocking him, calling him a master's lapdog and trash. The recruiter, without breaking his crazed gaze, pulls the trigger, and receives the fatal shot. Gi-hun searches the body and finds a mysterious card with the date October 31st and a club address. Police officer Hwang Jun-ho bursts in with his weapon drawn, inspecting room by room. In one of them, he finds the loan shark's thug, the only survivor, tied up and crying. Upon learning that Gi-hun is in room 410, he runs there and temporarily detains him, accusing him of murder. However, the thug manages to hit the officer with a fire extinguisher, knocking him unconscious. Recovered from the shock, the thug explains to Gi-hun that he worked for the murdered loan shark, that he has no ill intentions, and that he's glad to see the recruiter dead, responsible for the death of his boss and friend. Gi-hun, with the card in hand, takes note of the date and place where he might find new clues. Shortly after, Jun-ho interrogates Gi-hun. Both remember how they coincided in the events of the previous season. Gi-hun confesses that the recruiter died playing, not because he directly killed him, and explains that his goal is to stop the game, not perpetuate it. Jun-ho mentions that the leader, the front man, never showed his face, but he knows he's the central figure of the organization. Then, Gi-hun takes Jun-ho and the thug to a room full of money. He confesses that this fortune is the result of lives lost in the past game, and that he uses it to dismantle the organization. The officer clarifies that he's not interested in the money, while the thug, despite eyeing it sideways, feels more motivated to avenge his boss's death. Jun-ho warns that it won't be easy to face heavily armed soldiers, but Gi-hun reveals a professional arsenal hidden in the motel. Right there, he proposes to Jun-ho to leave the police to join his mission. Jun-ho hesitates, but both agree that if they cooperate, they have better chances of success. Meanwhile, a young woman named Nool works disguised as a pink rabbit in an amusement park. A sick girl, daughter of a comic artist, becomes fond of her and gives her a drawing. But Nool hides some scratches on her wrist so the girl doesn't see them. We see that the little girl is waiting for a transplant and her family lacks resources. Later, Nool, who sleeps in her car in a parking lot, tries to find out the whereabouts of someone close. At first, it's not clear if it's her daughter or her mother. She meets with a man who has also spoken with Gi-hun before. He returns her money and tells her there's no trace of the person she's looking for. Still, Nool begs him not to give up. That night, someone in a dark suit approaches her in the parking lot and hands her a card with the game symbols, inviting her to participate. Police officer Jun-ho visits a cemetery to place flowers on his sister-in-law's grave, who died some time ago. Later, dining with his mother, the family truth comes to light. Hwang In-ho, his brother, was forced to accept bribes to pay for his wife's treatment, who ultimately didn't survive. Additionally, In-ho donated a kidney to Jun-ho when he needed it, which bound them with a deep connection. However, after his wife's death, In-ho disappeared, leaving Jun-ho desperate and suspicious that his brother is behind the organization of the new games. The mother, distressed, laments the family breakdown, while Jun-ho clings to discovering the truth. Several days later, Gi-hun undergoes a peculiar procedure. A clandestine dentist embeds a GPS chip in a tooth inside Hotel Rosa itself. This way, his position can be tracked in real time if something goes wrong. At the same time, he recruits a team of thugs willing to infiltrate wherever necessary, as he and the police officer have discovered a clue about October 31st, and a certain nightclub where organization members will supposedly appear. Gi-hun also makes an international call to his daughter, who lives abroad and is named Kayun, but, overcome with emotion, he doesn't dare to speak and hangs up in silence. Nool, who works in disguise at the amusement park, forms a special bond with a sick girl, the artist's daughter, to whom she gives a drawing. One day, the little girl faints and is rushed to the hospital, with her father unable to afford the treatment. Moved, Nool picks up the hat the girl dropped and goes to see her, where, seeing the gravity of the situation, she feels even more the absence of her own daughter, and decides to participate in the sinister game, convinced that the money she could obtain might help save the girl's life, and perhaps allow her to find the daughter she lost. The designated night arrives. In a nightclub full of costumed people, some movement from the game is expected. Gi-hun's team splits up. Jun-ho, fearing being recognized, as he had infiltrated the games before, stays outside monitoring. Gi-hun enters with other men, scrutinizing every corner. Suddenly, a group of people in red jumpsuits appears, identical to the game's soldiers. Alarmed, Junho tries to enter with his weapon. The situation becomes complicated. Inside, a masked soldier silently approaches Gi-hun and indicates him to follow. Another soldier immobilizes the loan shark's thug. While Junho, from outside, calls on the radio and gets no response, Gi-hun ends up being led to a private area and finally to a white limousine that picks him up. Seeing the limousine start moving, Junho orders Gi-hun's allies to block it. However, they are repelled by sniper fire, revealing that the organization has a well-orchestrated plan. Inside the limousine, a robotic voice calls Gi-hun player and reproaches him for not boarding the plane that time. Gi-hun demands they stop the game and accuses the organizers of abusing desperate people. The robotic voice, impassive, assures that participants choose voluntarily and disqualifies those who die as trash. Gi-hun shoots at the door, but his weapon is useless. Desperate, he begs to be allowed to play again. He believes this way he can end the organization from within. The voice, enigmatic, mentions the idea that he won't be any hero capable of changing the world, and immediately releases a gas that leaves Gi-hun unconscious. When the limousine door opens, the silhouette of the front man, masked, is distinguished, welcoming him back to the game. Meanwhile, Newell, who accepted the invitation, arrives at a parking lot where several people appear with their own cards. They climb into containers set up as changing rooms. Surprisingly, we see that Newell doesn't end up as a contestant, but instead puts on a soldier's uniform, indicating that she will be part of the staff guarding the new game. The next day, police officer Hwang Junho, the loan shark's thug, and several other men board Captain Park's boat. They trust the GPS implanted in Seong Gi-hun's tooth to locate the island where the games take place. While sailing, the officer detects on his phone a location in the middle of nowhere, convinced that's where Gi-hun is. Meanwhile, Gi-hun opens his eyes in an immense dormitory where there are hundreds of participants in bunk beds. His uniform bears the number 456. A mysterious woman approaches him, talking about rituals and cleansing his karma. Just then, the pink soldiers enter and line up all the players. They announce 6 games, promising a large sum of money. Some participants protest. One demands his sneakers, another complains about not having his phone, and a purple-haired rapper, number 230, boasts about his fame. The cryptocurrency scammer, number 333, the conceited girl, number 196, and several others are also there, each with pending debts or crimes. The soldiers emphasize that everyone has come voluntarily and offer the possibility to leave if they wish, but no one withdraws. Next, they distribute a contract that everyone must sign to participate. The soldier warns that whoever refuses is out. Friction occurs. Number 230, purple hair, and his friend number 124 threatens scammer number 333, blaming him for ruining their lives. Meanwhile, another character, Jin Young, from what little is known, studies the rules carefully but ends up signing as well. Back on the boat, Captain Park and Junho talk. This time, they don't plan to fail. They use a drone to fly over the island that appears in the GPS signal. Simultaneously, a team group disembarks in an inflatable raft to approach from another shore, hoping to find Gi-hun. On the real island, the participants are led to a gigantic courtyard with a robotic doll in the background. Gi-hun, very nervous, recognizes the deadly game from the previous season. While the game unfolds, Junho and his team realize that the island they're exploring isn't the correct one. A local fisherman reveals that someone paid him to take the supposed GPS tooth to that location, diverting them from their route. They discover, with frustration, that they've fallen into a trap set by the organization, which has removed the chip from Gi-hun's mouth and used it to deceive them. With the storm approaching, the captain warns that they must return without having found the real whereabouts of the games. He tries to warn everyone that if they move after red light, they'll die when detected by the doll's sensors. Most think he's delirious, until a player, the conceited girl, number 196, laughs from a wasp sting and receives a lethal shot. Panic spreads. Many run and fall under bullets. Gi-hun shouts for them to stay still, but the initial chaos causes dozens of deaths. Still, some players react and begin to advance during the green light intervals. The purple-haired rapper, number 230, pushes anyone who crosses his path, showing his ruthless character. Gi-hun, moved, helps an injured participant by trying to drag him to the finish line. Although he manages to cross the line, the injured companion doesn't survive. Here we see it was Naol, in her role as a lethal and ruthless sniper. The final count yields a devastating result. 91 people die, and 365 manage to pass the test. The survivors return to the large bunk room, exhausted and in shock. Gi-hun receives complaints. Some suspect he knew too much, but don't understand why he's here again if he supposedly had won before. The soldiers announce there are 365 survivors and 91 eliminated. A wave of pleas breaks out for them to end this hell and let them leave. Gi-hun invokes clause number 3 of the contract, which allows the game to be terminated if the majority so decides. Before voting, the soldiers show the famous transparent piggy bank that descends over the room and begins to fill with stacks of bills. The initial count is 9,100 million. The sound of money hypnotizes many who had been about to give up. The voting begins, and players pass one by one. Some, dead scared, vote not to continue, while others, blinded by the possible fortune, choose continue. Gi-hun votes no. The rapper, 230, eager for power and money, votes yes. As it progresses, the voting becomes very close, with an almost total tie. When tension reaches its climax, the last to vote is player 001, who turns out to be someone of enormous importance. As he places his hand on the button, he smiles and presses yes. With this, the balance tips in favor of continuing the game. Upon raising his gaze, we discover that he is actually the masked leader. That is, the police officer's missing brother. Seong Gi-hun and his companion talk while eating in the Great Hall, surrounded by coffins that soldiers prepare with ribbons. The atmosphere is tense, but some contestants try to maintain a moment of calm. Suddenly the leader, the man with the black mask previously identified as number 001, approaches and talks with Gi-hun while other participants observe them. The topic of Dalgona cookies from the previous season comes up when someone mentions that the second game might be about cutting shapes from melted sugar. Some ask which shape is the easiest and which is the hardest, remembering that the umbrella shape carried an enormous risk. Gi-hun suggests he would like to share this information with everyone so they don't die, but the leader seems to have other ideas in mind. Not everyone wants the entire group to pass the test, as this would reduce the money accumulation in the large piggy bank. The participant with glasses and curly hair, identified as number 388, approaches looking for his mother, who is feeding a pregnant contestant with number 222. Several contestants discuss their situation, and the group consisting of the cryptocurrency scammer and the purple-haired rapper, number 230, appears along with his friend number 124. The rapper confronts the scammer about losing a lot of money due to his digital currency, and a fight breaks out. Some intervene timidly, while leader 001 makes his way through, stops the fighting, and ends up dominating the rapper with an impressive show of strength. When he leaves him on the ground, most applaud, relieved that the situation isn't getting worse. Meanwhile, in another section of the place, the soldiers return to their lockers. Newell is seen cleaning her face and leaving in apparent hurry. When the scene returns to the bunk area, the large piggy bank full of bills continues sparkling above. Many participants are restless and cannot sleep. Gi-hun can't sleep either. The leader approaches him and they talk about guilt, past deaths, and the need for money for loved ones. At this point, the narrative shows an abrupt change to a sinister room where a group of soldiers manipulates recent corpses, as if trying to extract something from them. It's suggested that some contestants didn't die immediately, but were finished off to prevent them from staying alive. In parallel, a soldier in black uniform communicates through a walkie-talkie, and then reprimands Newell, giving her strict orders. It seems clear that this black uniformed soldier is an important commander, different from leader 001, who is inside the game. He refers to an organ trafficking operation, a practice he justifies by saying that the participants' bodies, sooner or later, were going to perish. He speaks nostalgically about how he recruited who is now there as a soldier, reminding them that, initially, their work supposedly consisted of ending the suffering of hopeless people. The black soldier regrets that some mercy shots have spoiled organs they plan to sell, and also maintains that no one in the organization will find out about these dealings because, on another occasion, an internal doctor gave clues to a participant and they were almost discovered. But this time they hired an outside doctor to leave no loose ends. The subordinate doesn't seem satisfied, as they believe their mission would be different and feels betrayed. Tension grows when they discuss the morality of using the organs of the recently deceased. Finally, the black soldier demands obedience, but the other leaves, reluctant to continue with this practice. The police officer enters the station, where his superior scolds him and calls him stubborn for insisting on going after that supposed game island. Unable to show conclusive evidence, the officer is on the verge of definitively losing his position. Later, while driving, he contacts the loan shark's thug and the captain to organize 2 search teams as soon as the weather improves. They meet in a venue where the captain explains that he trusts his experience at sea and promises to sail with them the next day. The officer and the thug insist they cannot delay because each passing day puts the participants, including Seong Gi-hun, in danger. The captain observes the men the thug has recruited. They're tough guys, ready to fight if necessary. Finally, they agree that at dawn they'll divide the group into 2 vessels to track different areas. Meanwhile, in the game compound, Seong Gi-hun has a nightmare in which he remembers the Dalgona cookie game, but upon waking discovers that the upcoming test is completely different. The next competition approaches, and the pregnant contestant with number 222 exchanges words with the cryptocurrency scammer. Other characters, like the purple-haired rapper, number 230, and his friend number 124, prepare themselves with nerve pills. There are many crossed conversations. The mother with the curly-haired, glasses-wearing son, she's an elderly lady with unknown number, he's 007. The mysterious girl who dresses peculiarly, the supposed wizard or spiritualist. Everyone tries to guess what the second test will consist of, while soldiers give vague instructions. When the moment arrives, the robotic voice announces a game for teams of 5 people, with legs tied 2 by 2 to advance in a 6-legs style. They must overcome 5 mini-challenges inspired by Korean children's games. For example, flipping takji, throwing stones in a hopscotch-like game, playing gongi, spinning a top, and kicking the jegi. Each team has 5 minutes to complete all tests in a multicolored circuit. If they fail at any stage or time runs out, they're eliminated. Groups form frantically. Some compete to recruit strong or skilled people. Others discard those who seem weak or pregnant. Gi-hun gathers a small team that trusts him for having played before, although he doesn't actually know this modality. Tension escalates when several lose time or fail the tests. Certain teams begin to suffer immediate executions. Pink-clad soldiers drag bodies to ribbon-adorned coffins, and some participants who are still breathing are finished off without mercy. The purple-haired rapper takes another of his nerve pills and encourages his people with boastful airs. Meanwhile, pregnant number 222, the cryptocurrency scammer, and several others discuss throwing strategies and who will do each game. Sweat, fear, and urgency cause fatal errors. Not everyone manages to reach the goal before the timer runs out, and the speakers announce the numbers of those eliminated. Amidst this confusion, more coffins are seen arriving, and desperation spreads among the survivors. Some continue protesting because they thought the next test would be the sugar cookie or something Gi-hun would master, but the organization varies the rules as it sees fit. As executions are carried out and bodies are collected, there's an unsettling pause. In the end, several teams complete the circuit agonizingly, while others collapse at the finish line, struck down by gunfire. The pregnant girl's team and the curly-haired boy's team with his mother and the witch continue struggling in the colored circuit, where tests like throwing dice and spinning the top remain. The glasses-wearing boy's mother, 007, makes a perfect throw with the dice, while the rest, very nervous, cheer her on. The witch has to spin the top, but the floor is stained with blood, which further complicates the situation. She hesitates, and the boy who dresses as a woman ends up pushing her out of her shock. With barely a second remaining, they manage to get the top to spin long enough, and the team completes the stage just in time. Several deaths occur in other teams that fail to overcome the tests or run out of time. Soldiers bring coffins and finish off those who are still breathing. Only a few reach the finish line safe and sound. 2 teams remain in play, one of them with Gi-hun and the leader, 001. They advance with great tension because the leader repeatedly fails in the spinning top test. Each error consumes precious seconds, and reproaches and desperation begin. In the last attempt, the top stays upright and the team moves to the next phase. Gi-hun takes charge of the final test, a kind of duck or object throwing game. When time seems to be running out, he manages to hit the target in the last second, while the other team falls behind and ends up being executed. Although they celebrate their success, there's a bittersweet atmosphere. Back in the bunk bedroom, some contestants who passed the test chat. The purple-haired rapper, 230, and his group gather, including the pregnant woman, 222, and the purple-haired friend, 124. Separately, the boy who dresses as a woman, the elderly mother, the young man with glasses and curls, 007, and the witch also share their relief at having survived. Between both groups, they discuss the risks of the game and debate possible strategies for what's to come. Meanwhile, in a locker area, Soldier 011, or Soldier Newell, is surrounded by colleagues who hold her back and confront her. She defends herself, although it's not clear what her captors are planning. Shortly after, Gi-hun's team returns triumphant and receives distant greetings from the others. The leader shares some reflections with them, and the pregnant woman, 222, appears intrigued by the mysterious 001's intentions. When the alarm sounds, soldiers burst into the dormitory again and line up all participants to announce that, after the most recent casualties, the prize has risen to 78 billion won. They also introduce a mysterious box. No one knows for certain what it contains, and the main soldier vaguely explains the new instructions. Some contestants appear euphoric upon hearing the accumulated amount. Others discuss whether to continue playing or leave, as deaths and psychological pressure have been increasing. The curly-haired boy's mother, the elderly lady, along with the pregnant woman and the young man who dresses as a woman, talk about what they could do if they abandoned the game. They see the enormous piggy bank full of bills and debate whether it's worth continuing, while in another group, Seong Gi-hun and the leader, 001, exchange views with their people. A vote begins to decide whether the game continues or not. Each player must press a button reflecting their stance. Nervousness erupts when, within the same teams, there are those who wish to leave and those who want to risk more for money. Some participants argue heatedly. The pregnant woman cries asking for a way out, and the elderly man shouts desperately, while the leader insists that most people will choose to continue. Finally, Gi-hun votes, but the preference to continue wins again. Frustrated, those who wanted to stop return to their bunks. The next morning, everyone goes to breakfast and new conversations break out. The mother, the grandma, and her son, the curly-haired one, engage in a conversation where he begs for something that isn't clear, while the pregnant woman and the feminine-looking boy share confidences about their past lives. Meanwhile, the cryptocurrency scammer, 333, finds himself cornered in the bathrooms by the purple-haired rapper, 230, and his accomplice, 124, who continue demanding answers about the money they lost because of him. When threats turn physical, the leader bursts in to interrupt the scuffle. Later in the dormitory, several contestants move mattresses and pillows, fearing another night of violence. Gi-hun and player 390 discuss strategies to avoid being attacked while sleeping. At night, the elderly lady shows her son a small knife hidden in her hair and explains they must defend themselves. Then, the pregnant woman, the lady, and the young man who dresses as a woman convince a soldier to let them go to the bathroom. There they seem to plan something. The pregnant woman is distressed, and the other two try to instill courage in her. Meanwhile, the police officer and the captain continue their attempts to locate the island. They adjust the search plan, change radio frequency, and agree not to use phones to avoid new ambushes. The next day, the music sounds again with lights suddenly turning on. The soldiers order participants to get up and form lines. Among them is Soldier Newell, or 011, who leads them through colored stairs to a circus-like enclosure with a rotating platform in the center. The robotic voice gives general instructions about the next test, though without clarifying them completely. Some, like Gi-hun and the leader, observe the surroundings and wonder what it will be about. The platform begins to move like a carousel, and there the scene cuts off, leaving the mystery of what the next game will be like. The episode opens with the rotating platform in full operation, but chaos soon breaks out. Soldiers appear shooting, and collective hysteria pushes players to run from one room to another, as if they needed to find shelter before the guards reach them. During each pause, some manage to break free and take refuge in time. Others fall under bullets or find themselves trapped as the room doors close. Seong Gi-hun and the leader, 001, move with apparent calmness amid the confusion, without it being clear why they appear more serene than the others. The elderly mother, Grandma, about to be left out, manages to enter a room along with Gi-hun. There are brief exchanges of nervous words. The lady checks if her son, the curly-haired boy, has also managed to protect himself. Between each round of platform movement, conversations accelerate, and various participants either reunite or separate forever. During this coming and going, the leader bursts into a room and executes a contestant who doesn't understand why he is the target. Some corpses continue breathing inside coffins, but the soldiers proceed to incinerate them anyway. The survivors return exhausted to the collective dormitory. Gi-hun talks with player 390 to try to understand the brutality of the rules and the apparent arbitrariness of the deaths. Meanwhile, in another location, the captain and the police officer discuss on the boat about the strategy to find the island, reviewing maps and coordinating the crew. After the brutal carousel test, the survivors gather for a new money count and another vote that will decide whether they continue or not. In parallel, the police officer and his group, along with the captain, advance in their search for the island, discovering hidden gates and passages. One of their men even suffers an accident with an explosion. Meanwhile, in the main dormitory, Seong Gi-hun, the leader, 001, and other participants alternate between moments of tension and short breaks to eat or debate what strategy to follow regarding the vote. When night falls, two antagonistic factions, the purple-haired rapper, 230, and his people, versus the cryptocurrency scammer, 333, with his group, become entangled in a verbal struggle inside the bathroom. The clash evolves into an explicit fight, pushing, punching, and at a critical moment, someone tries to stab another with a fork or something sharp that had been hidden. Both sides accuse each other of manipulating voters and forcing results. Thanos and the rest of the contestants face off as if it were a fight to the death, because essentially it is. Among shouts and blows, some players who are still alive begin counting how many remain. Nam-gyu, badly wounded, appears alongside several of his people and explains the situation. Group X ambushed them by surprise. He's furious and accuses his enemies of having provoked everything to manipulate tomorrow's vote. Player 47 doesn't believe it, counterattacks saying that it's Nam-gyu himself and his people who have planned to reduce the competition. In a matter of seconds, chaos erupts, and everyone starts pointing fingers at each other. Meanwhile, Captain Park's drone flies over one of the islands in the middle of a stormy night. The pilot catches Park manipulating the recording equipment, and tension immediately explodes. Park stabs him several times and throws him overboard. Woo-sok, hearing noise, approaches to investigate, but Park pretends everything is normal and manages to dismiss him before he notices anything strange. Among the contestants, many do quick calculations. If no one changes sides, their group will win the vote by just one vote. They feel optimistic, believing they will finally get out of this nightmare. Through the speakers, the official voice warns them that in 30 minutes the lights will go out. The plan is clear. No one will betray their faction, and everyone will vote first thing. At that moment, game employees receive orders through the speakers. The special game is about to begin, and they must go to their posts. Workers are seen leaving the rooms and taking formation in different corners of the complex. As players prepare for the night, Gi-hun's team outlines their strategy. They suspect the opposing side will try to attack while they sleep to alter the voting. Some propose striking first, but Gi-hun refuses. He explains that joining the killing only benefits those at the top, the ones pulling the strings of the show. Instead, he proposes attacking the control room during the disorder. They'll wait for a new fight to break out and, amid the confusion, they'll sneak in and surprise the guards. The blackout comes, and Gi-hun's team follows the instructions. They hide under the bunks, in silence. Outside, chaos breaks out, with rival factions hunting each other. There's a real bloodbath. According to Gi-hun's plan, they don't intervene. If they took part, they could lose valuable allies and risk their plan. Besides, Gi-hun trusts that the guards won't let the number of contestants reduce too much. Finally, the soldiers burst in to stop the massacre and check who's still alive. The moment Gi-hun was waiting for arrives, they play dead, and when the guards lower their guard, his team attacks them and seizes some weapons. Other contestants also manage to escape in the midst of chaos, but Gi-hun manages to hold a guard and forces him to guide them to the control room. At this point, Gi-hun and his people rebel completely. They shoot at the cameras and the masked officer orders all units to concentrate. Sirens sound and the guards prepare, but the players don't waste time. They collect weapons and ammunition from the fallen soldiers. Gi-hun encourages other companions to join, especially those who know how to handle weapons. Several join in, including a former Special Forces sergeant who gives brief instructions on using machine guns. Thus, Gi-hun, Jung-bae, Young-il, Hyun-ju, Dae-ho, and others climb the stairs guided by the guard they've captured. A shootout occurs where they take down groups of soldiers. The masked officer, from his post, orders blocking the advance toward the control area. Gi-hun devises a trick. He puts on the guard's mask and manages to enter the command room, while Young-bae accompanies him. Young-il stays behind to hold off the soldiers and buy time. Gi-hun uses the radio to request reinforcements and ammunition, and Young-il sends 2 players to support him while Hyun-ju looks for more bullets. Dae-ho offers help but loses courage and doesn't return. When Young-il and his small group reach Gi-hun and Jung-bae, they discover that the control room is heavily protected. Gi-hun proposes finding an alternative entrance, and Young-il claims to know a back way. He takes the 2 players, promising to take the guards by surprise. Gi-hun and Jung-bae continue exchanging fire with the soldiers, while Young-il leaves with the ammunition Gi-hun has given him. The betrayal erupts. Young-il, actually an infiltrator, executes the 2 players accompanying him. Over the radio, he pretends to be wounded and makes Gi-hun believe all is lost. Then he contacts the soldiers, revealing that he is the frontman and ordering them to end the uprising. Meanwhile, Hyun-ju tries to communicate with Dae-ho unsuccessfully. The guards burst in and capture several of Gi-hun's team members. Hyun-ju wants to face them, but Gyum-ja stops him, asking him not to waste his life. Gi-hun and Jung-bae find themselves cornered, unaware that Young-il is actually the front man. With his face covered by his black mask, Young-il stands before Gi-hun and mocks his heroism. As a finale, he shoots Jung-bae in the chest, leaving Gi-hun devastated as he watches his friend die. Season 2 closes with the piggy bank at 41.1 billion won. If in the hypothetical Season 3, the remaining 45 players were to vote to leave, each would take more than 900 million. However, after the credits, a new twist is shown. In the red light, green light test, there are now not 1, but 2 gigantic mannequins that rise threateningly before the contestants, as a presage that the terror is not over.